Just to let you know, this episode deals with Don't Breathe, a 2016 horror movie, so expect talk of violence and sexual assault. Welcome to Filmability. My name is Joel Fisher and I'm the author of Filmability, A History of Disability in Cinema, and this is a podcast all about disability in cinema. Thanks for listening. If you've been listening so far, I think I'm getting in the swing of things, but let me know if I'm wrong, let me know if there's anything I've missed out, let me know if there's anything I've got wrong about the movie or disability or anything above. This week's movie is Don't Breathe, a horror movie from 2016 starring Stephen Lang, Jane Levy, Dylan Miret, and Daniel Zabato. It's directed by Fede Alvarez and co-written by Rodo Sayegues. Like biopics, horror is a genre that filmmakers like to visit when including disabled characters. However, whereas in biopics the disabled character is the hero, in horror disabled people are usually either the victim or the villains. And this is no different in Don't Breathe, as it's about a trio of burglars who invade a blind man's home in order to steal his money. But little do they know that he has a particular set of skills that he has to enable him to find them and finish them off. As always, I'll be going through the movie plot, so if you haven't watched it yet, I suggest you do so before you continue listening. You can find it to watch for free if you have Netflix subscription in the UK. Otherwise, you can rent it or buy it digitally or on Blu-ray or DVD. So the movie starts with a man who's dragging a woman by her hair up the road and leaving a trail of blood behind. It's quite a striking image. I wonder if we'll get back to that later. Anyway, next we see three people entering a house with a burglar alarm which is about to go off. These people are Rocky, played by Jane Levy, Alex, played by Dylan Miret, and Money, played by Daniel Zabato. And I mean, calling a character Money in this kind of a film might get a bit confusing, but I'll try and clear it up as we go along. Anyway, they stop the alarm with a handheld device that they have, and they start to look around for valuables, putting things in their bags, and Money urinates on the carpet, and they leave by smashing a brick through a window and running away. I mean, there's nothing like a crime scene where you've left DNA evidence behind, but they're not the brightest, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, next we see the gang are in their car, and they're celebrating the success, and Rocky talks about her plans to move away from the town. She encourages Alex to go with her and Money, who is her boyfriend, but Alex says that he has to look after his dad. And they drop Alex back home, and he starts to look for his dad, but nobody's home, and he starts to go through his dad's desk drawers. Sort of implies that maybe, although he does feel like he has to look after his dad, he may not have a trustworthy relationship with him. Next we go with Money, and he's counting the money that they got from the robbery. I told you it was going to be confusing. And he's talking to another man who he owes money to, and he tells him that there's nothing else of value that they've got, and if they want to make money, he has to steal money. Money has to take money. It will get less confusing as it goes along, I think. I hope. Yeah, anyway, we cut to a restaurant where Money is talking about a house where the owner has a large sum of money in a safe somewhere, or something like that. Alex isn't sure and starts talking about the risks, and Rocky says that the risk is worth it because it could be their last job. I mean, to be fair, they're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, so I can see where she's coming from. However, Alex gets anxious and he leaves, and he's still unsure that he's doing the right thing. And then the next thing we show Alex in his bedroom. He gets a text from Rocky encouraging him to do the job. He looks up the address for the house that Money was talking about, and he finds an article saying that the owner of the house got a large sum after a court settlement. Back at Rocky's place, her mother, Ginger, played by Katja Burka, is asking for money. Not money. Money, cash. Knowing that she has some. Rocky then gets her sister, Didi, played by Emma Bergfici, ready to go out the house. And you can see that there's a bond between them. And also a sense that Rocky feels trapped. In the next scene, Money is casing the neighbourhood. He's taking pictures of the house and generally, looking suspicious, sort of. Rocky and Alex are in the car and they're bonding as she's talking about a tattoo she got recently that Alex has noticed. And she talks about how her alcoholic father left her and her mother blamed Rocky for him leaving. And as a punishment, she used to lock Rocky in the trunk and leave her there for hours. She says that a ladybird tattoo she got reminded her of the ladybird in the trunk that she found and how it reminded her that she was safe and that she could concentrate on that and not think about the horrible situation. Then Money comes back and shows them the picture of the house, and a man goes past the car and his dog jumps up the window, barking angrily. Money says that the blind man's house is their next target, and Rocky's surprised, as he would be, because she didn't know the man was blind, and she wasn't sure whether that's a really, ethical thing to do. Ethical burglary, I'm not sure. That's not how she puts it, but you know what I mean. Money just says that just because he's blind doesn't make him a saint. And yeah, there's some kind of truth to that. Disabled people are just as ordinary as anybody else. They can be saints, they can be sinners, they can be greedy, or they can be selfless. Disabled people have lives just as much as non-disabled people, and what they choose to do with them can be just as various as those who do not have to deal with a disability on top of everything else. Whenever a disabled person is seen in public, there's a habit to have a preconceived idea about them based on what people think about disability. But the truth is that they're just going about their day. However, it may be best not to underestimate them. And now back to the movie. They get to the house and they're trying to figure out how to get in. They send Alex to the side of the house where he sees the dog that was barking at the car earlier on. And he looks through a window in the house that has bars in it. He tries to open the window, but Rocky suggests that she can get through another window that's higher up and that she's smaller and she can fit through and the window doesn't have bars on it. So, from inside the house, we see a window smashing and the burglar alarm is activated. Rocky climbs through and goes through the house and checks for the alarm, and just before it's about to go off, she presses the device that turns it off. And it remains very quiet in the house, dead quiet. Almost like this is a horror movie that's trying to create tension. Outside, Alex and Money are talking about Rocky. Alex worried, but Money reassures him and says that she's fine, although he does say that he's worried himself because, she is his girlfriend. And they get inside and they start to slowly move around the house, trying to find where the money might be, and Money goes up to the blind man's bedroom and the TV turns on, showing a little girl playing. Money then sees the blind man, played by Stephen Lang, sitting up in his bed, and he stays quiet, hoping he won't be noticed. And the blind man turns off the TV and lays in bed, as if he's not noticed he was there at all. And this is a bit of a thing about the way blind people are portrayed in cinema. You've all had the expression that when you lose one sense, all your other senses are heightened. That's rubbish. I'm afraid that is completely untrue. If you lose a sense, I wouldn't say lose a sense, but if you are blind or if you're deaf, then you get used to seeing the world differently. You can be more aware of things that you wouldn't otherwise. If you were able to see, then your hearing might be better because you're more aware of things that might be around you. And if you are deaf, then what you see makes you more aware of your surroundings. And that's just what it is. And also the thing where if a blind man is in the room with you, you can stay quiet, but he's still going to sense that you're there, because we don't only have a sense of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and the other one I can't remember, touch, that's the one. We have a sense of spatial awareness. So, if you ever had the feeling that you were being watched, and that's it. I mean, that happens quite a lot in cinema and perhaps TV, but in reality, the blind person would know you were there. Going back to the movie, Money goes back downstairs and says that the blind man's asleep and it'll be fine. He's absolutely not fazed by the fact that the blind man might have pretended that he didn't notice him. They find the safe with a padlock on it, and Money puts a gun into the neck of a plastic bottle and fires it at the lock, thinking that the bottle will act as a silencer. It doesn't, because that's not a thing either. Money's not very clever, maybe. And the blind man comes downstairs asking who's there. Money makes an excuse that he was drunk and he wandered in, but he soon drops the act and pulls his gun on the blind man. He tries to act like he's in charge, but the blind man moves towards him. He can see that the blind man is not afraid of anybody. He's tough. He will very much quickly get in charge. And even went to the point where Money hasn't shot him because he's probably nervous. He doesn't actually want to kill anybody. That means that it gives the blind man the opportunity to get close to Money and to disarm him himself. Rocky's there watching all this, and as the blind man interrogates Money, he's not getting what he wants from him, and so afterwards, the blind man shoots him dead. And Rocky is still very quiet in the corner. Again, this is a case of if the blind man can't see you, then he doesn't know you're there. But she's staying very quiet. She's putting her hand over her mouth. She's crying. And she's just trying not to make a sound. But the blind man is still wandering around the house, because just because he's caught one person doesn't mean that there aren't other people there. Meanwhile, Alex is moving around the house, and he goes into the kitchen and sees the blind man locking all the doors, and he starts to board up the windows too with a large piece of wood and nails. Rocky sees the blind man go to a safe with an electronic pad and realises that that's where he must keep the money. Well, you see now that the character Money has died. I can talk about money and it won't be confusing. So when I say money, I mean money. So after he does that, he leaves the closet and he still hasn't noticed that Rocky is cowering in the corner. Alex goes back to the closet to assure Rocky that the blind man is not around, and she immediately goes to the safe after seeing the blind man put in the code. She puts in the code herself and starts stuffing the money into a bag. It's clear that money is more important than, well, money ever was. Suddenly the blind man bursts through the door as he enters the hallway. They stay still as he moves round, and he gets hold of Money's body and drags him across the floor. He stops for a second and holds up a gun as if he thought he heard something. Money's phone goes off suddenly, and the blind man fires the gun by accident. He then goes over to where he heard the phone and picks it up, and he goes back to dragging Money into the basement. So he still have a sense of perception here where, although he can't see the phone, he still goes to where Money's phone was and picks it up, and goes back to where he left Money's body and picks up the body to take it down to the basement. And then afterwards he does something which I would say changes the perception of the blind man, because it's almost like he's a creature rather than a human being. And I can tell you, as I said before, just because you lose one sense, your other senses don't heighten. And I'm not saying that he gets a better perception of smell, but he starts to sniff the air and senses that there's a change and something's wrong. And I mean, in this depiction, again, I said there's like a creature, and it doesn't really represent a real blind person. Blind people are not bloodhounds. They can't sense things like that. I suppose if there was a sense of smell in the air that was different, it would probably be because somebody was burning something, or they had very strong aftershave or perfume or something like that. Other than that, no, that's not a thing. But like I said, this is a depiction of a blind man who is animalistic. He's a creature, and that's the outline of what the film's going for. So yeah, the blind man then goes to the safe and quickly realises that the safe has been emptied, and he cries out angrily. He's been worked up. He's angry, and you've made him mad. So he's getting more and more dangerous as it goes along. In the basement, Alex and Rocky go down, and out of nowhere, a woman lunges at them, and they realise that she's been tied up and gagged in a well-lit part of the basement, which has been padded with cushions, implying a makeshift kind of soundproofing. She hands them a note, which also very handily has a bit of exposition on it, where it says of an article which says about that she was the woman who hit the blind man's daughter with her car, and it seems that the blind man has kidnapped her in revenge. So the blind man is making his way to the basement. He's got a gun. Alex and Rocky are trying to release this woman who has been trapped in there by trying to get her out of the harness that she's been trapped in. And although for some reason she's still gagged, maybe it's cheaper not to pay the actress if she doesn't have to speak. I don't know. Something like that, maybe. Alex then tries to open the hatch, which leads out from the basement into the streets, and realises that it's locked. It's something maybe, they perhaps should have thought about before they went to the basement, but never mind. So he finally gets it opened, but wouldn't you know it, the blind man is there. He's got a gun, and he shoots Alex, but it only grazes his ear. They go quiet as he goes scrambling around, and he realises that he's actually shot and killed the woman who he had restrained in the basement in the first place. And again, he cries out in anger and leaves the basement. However, the lights go out, and Rocky and Alex are left realising that the blind man has come back, and that they're on an equal ground now, or in fact, he might have the main advantage. And so we get into this bit where it's totally dark. All we can see is a sort of night vision version of the characters, and they're running around trying to escape from him, and he's going around randomly firing a gun at any noise that you can hear. That they start to move around, making noises to try and distract him, but it doesn't really work, and Rocky ends up getting too close to the blind man just as he's about to fire his gun, but it misses her. However, the blind man then finds Alex and starts to strangle him, but he gets away, and they see the light coming through the door at the entrance of the basement, and they make their escape. They get out there to be met by the blind man's dog, who is angrily growling at them. Is a little, I think, Rottweiler. I might be wrong. I don't know what breed, but he's nasty. He's angry, and he's only looking after his owner. They kind of try to calm down the dog, but it chases them upstairs as Rocky was trying to unlock the front door, but she's not been able to. They also find that the windows upstairs have been locked shut too. A blind man comes back out of the basement and reloads his gun. They talk about how they're going to escape, and Rocky says that she still wants to leave with the money despite the fact that they might die. This is very much showing that her character is ruthless and willing to do anything to survive. And then, as they are trying to find a way out, Alex is surprised by the dog again, and he ends up falling out of the house onto the glass roof of the kitchen, and it knocks him unconscious. And things are made worse when you see the slow cracking of the glass, and all Rocky can do now is look down at the second floor window, and try to think of a way to save Alex. Alex then quickly wakes up and he realises the glass is cracking, and it does what he can to slowly move away. But the blind man shoots his gun after he's heard the cracking in the kitchen, and Alex falls through the glass roof. Although, thankfully, he's still not dead. He then goes into the kitchen and hides as the blind man gets closer and closer. He's thinking about going to the basement, but changes his mind and fires the gun in the kitchen, missing Alex, who lunges out and attacks the blind man. But he is overpowered, and just when you think Alex might escape, the blind man subdues him and kills him with a pair of garden shears. Rocky is struggling through a crawl space that she's found in the house, and she's looking under the ground floor. She sees a vent leading to the outside and tries to open it, but wouldn't you know it, the blind man opens a hatch in the crawl space and pulls her out of it. He subdues her and knocks her unconscious. It's not looking good for either of them, really. So then Rocky wakes up and she's where the other woman was, in a harness, in the basement, in the well-lit area. Her hands are tied behind her back, though, which makes it different from how the other woman was restrained, although Rocky is sort of hanging from the harness on her back. And then this is where we really see how awful the blind man is. It's very much feels like that, despite the fact that they've tried to rob a blind veteran, that the filmmakers wanted to make him as reprehensible of a character as they possibly could. So this is how he explains how he had captured the woman who had killed his daughter in order to impregnate her and to give him another daughter. It's nasty, it's disgusting, it's just the point where you think, even if you have a little bit of sympathy for him, you've lost all of it. And as he's captured Rocky, she is going to be the one to replace the woman and give him the daughter that he'd wanted. It's grubby, it's nasty, it's sort of unnecessarily dark, I think, in my opinion. Although, you know, like I said, I think the film goes out of its way to make sure that nobody thinks that this blind man doesn't deserve what's coming to him. So meanwhile, Alex is upstairs, and wouldn't you know it, he's still alive. Despite the fact that the audience sort of saw a shot where the blind man skewed him with a pair of garden shears, he somehow missed. And Alex is still alive, he's fine, and he's trying to decide what to do next. I think he might have just woken up, I don't know, it's a bit unclear, although considering everything that's happened downstairs in the meantime, you think he would have tried to do something a bit sooner. But anyway, back into the basement. Well, I won't go into it, obviously, because it's nasty, but the blind man is going to follow through with his plan to try and impregnate Rocky. I'm not going to go into details, it's not necessary, but it's a moment you just, it's not good. However, Alex has made his way downstairs, found a gun, and shoots the blind man. He comes to rescue Rocky. Once she's released, she quite rightly kicks the shit out of the blind man, and they restrain him and lock him in his own enclosure. Alex then unlocks the door, and just as he does, they then go upstairs and they go to the front door and they spend a lot of time trying to unlock it. It's a very complicated situation. It seems like the blind man knew that they couldn't escape, so he made it as hard as possible for them to get out if they even tried. But just as Alex does get the door open, finally unlocks everything, the blind man comes again and he shoots Alex dead. However, Rocky is still there and she takes the opportunity to get out the door and make a run for it. And she reminds him that he's worthless in the sunlight and that, just basically implying that he's better off in the dark because he could move around there but out in the real world, he's completely helpless. Nice bit of ableism. But there is one thing that she's forgotten. She's forgotten that there is a dog. And so the dog runs after her, and she just about makes it to her car before the dog is barking at the window, just as it did before. And he even manages to get through an open part of the window, but Rocky manages to manually close the window. However, that's not the end of the problems, as the dog stands at the bottom of the car and Rocky sees no other choice left. She goes back into the trunk of the car and tries to pry it open, going back to the story of her childhood where she was left in the boot of her car as a punishment. Going back to the story of her childhood where she was saying about how her mother would lock her in the trunk and leave her there for hours. So that's when you think that she's tried to get the trunk open and to get out of the car. The dog appears at the window, and as she gets it open, she rigs it so that the dog goes after her and she traps it in the trunk of the car. Although I just realised, as I said earlier, when I said the trunk, I was thinking in the English use of the words, which means box, and trunk not meaning the boot of a car, which is how the English would use it. However, the dog then breaks free because it's an unstoppable killing machine, and she attaches a rope to his collar and to a part of the inside of the car, and there's a shot of the dog facing her and barking in her face while she's bleeding away in terror. And it's very reminiscent of the bit in one of the Alien movies where Ripley is faced with the alien. I mean, was Fede Alvarez looking to make an Alien movie at the time? I think he was. So anyway, then, as if things haven't got any worse, the blind man appears behind Rocky, and then we go to where we see him dragging her down the road by her hair, as it was in the opening shot. And she ends up back in the basement. But after a bit, she sees the device that she used to shut the burglar alarm off, and she uses it to activate it. Makes a very loud noise, disorientates the blind man, and she goes back up to where he is, attacks him, and finishes him off with a crowbar. She escapes, and the police car pulls up at his house. And then the final scene we see in a train station, Rocky is with her daughter and she sees the news that the blind man isn't dead like she thought he was, and that the police know about the intruders. Her and her daughter leave as she looks unsure of what could happen to her. There is a sequel, which is directed by Rodo Sayegas and produced by Fede Alvarez, but I'll be covering that at another time. I can't do 2 films at once, it's a lot, and it's a lot to do one, I hope you understand. So there we go, Don't Breathe. A horror movie that perhaps pushes the boundaries as far as it can go, and does so with a creepy and intense atmosphere. As I said earlier, I think that Don't Breathe's villain, as a blind veteran, is meant to feel evil to justify the controversy of putting a blind veteran in the role of a villain in the first place. However, the sequel puts him in the role of the protagonist, perhaps in order to make the audience feel differently about him, and maybe to ensure the audience that the filmmakers weren't just demonising blind people. Although in Don't Breathe, every character has a grey area. Money is perhaps the most criminally minded of the trio of burglars. His carefree attitude makes him almost seem as if he enjoys the criminal lifestyle, despite living every day by a knife edge. Although his relationship with Rocky suggests that he has a heart behind his bravado. Rocky comes across as the most sympathetic of the characters, and there's a reason that she's the final girl, so to speak. However, her darker side is shown when she is willing to do anything it takes to escape her life, even if it means people have to die along the way. And there's Alex, a more insecure character whose audiences may warm to, as he seems the most reluctant to do what he does. However, the one little scene where he's going through his dad's desk drawer suggests that he's not entirely trustworthy, even if he almost fills the hero role by the end. Even the blind man is a somewhat sympathetic character, at least to start with. The audience is not going to revel in the thought of a blind man being robbed because he's seen as weak and helpless and vulnerable even. And his backstory may even make the audience pause for thought because of his immense grief that he may be enduring. However, the coldness in the way that he kills and the extreme lengths of depravity that he goes to so that he can get revenge for his daughter's death erases any concern the audience may have for him. For the more observant, Don't Breathe even portrays the blind man as something other than human in the way he behaves. He moves around stalking his prey and actually sniffs the air like a dog in order to get more information as to where he needs to go and where his next victims may be. It should also be noted that the blind man is never referred to by any name but by any of the characters, and is even credited as the blind man in the credits to further dehumanise him. Fede Alvarez clearly had a taste for horror, and as I mentioned earlier, his status in the horror world is only growing after the success of Alien Romulus, which was released in 2024. Okay, now onto the trivia for Don't Breathe. Stephen Lang wore contact lenses that greatly restricted his vision, as is often used when portraying blind people in cinema, and this was particularly effective in low light. The other actors in the scene, taking place in the dark, wore lenses to make them look like they had dilated pupils, but also greatly restricted their vision, so in that scene it is literally the blind leading the blind. The street where the blind man lives is called Buena Vista, which is translated as to meaning good view in Spanish. The combination to the blind man's safe, 2978, is actually directed Fede Alvarez's birthday, February 9th, 1978. And director Fede Alvarez also plays the viola on the soundtrack of the film. And to research for the film, Fede Alvarez watched videos of a blind YouTuber named Tommy Ellison while researching for the film, which, short of actually talking to a blind person about the film, is quite a good thing because Tommy Edison's channel is great. It talks a lot about his experiences of being blind and things that people may not have thought about when talking to a blind person, or things that are perspectives that only he could really give. I'd thoroughly recommend checking out his channel. That's it for me this year. I'll be back on January 5th where I'll be talking about My Left Foot, the Oscar-winning biopic of author, painter and poet Christy Brown, as portrayed by Daniel Day-Lewis. If you'd like to contact me, you can do so by searching for film-ability at Bluesky, by searching for film_ability at Instagram, and if you'd like to email me, my address is film-ability@outlook.com. And also I have, if you are in a position to contribute, a Patreon, and you can find that at patreon.com/film-ability. Don't forget, I also have a book, Film Ability, A History of Disability in Cinema, that you can find on Amazon and Kindle and paperback. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.